Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. Patrick, we have Arb Day has come and gone. As always, the Cubs get us that news in such a timely manner. But we can. I think the news. We had some agreements. The news is Kyle Tucker and the Cubs cannot meet in the middle. 15 million is what the Cubs have set their number at. 17.5 million is what Tucker's representatives have set their number at. This isn't a disaster or anything like that. This isn't the worst case scenario. I think it looks bad optically. It's just a mess. Like, you don't want this, and I don't this stuff. Like, in the grand scheme of things, this probably won't matter. But the Cubs fans are already irritated because post Tucker they haven't done much, except for shed salary. I'm using air quotes for those not watching. Cody Bellinger, but you can't these. It just feels like tripping over your own foot. Like, it's what they seem to do this really well.
Yeah, I think this doesn't impact any sort of long-term deal because I don't think there's any expectation that they were going to do that. You know what I mean? This is not like, oh, this buys them more time to figure out a long-term deal. No, both sides have a pretty clear expectation that he will become a free agent after this upcoming season, and that's fine. And look, I mean, Kyle Tucker's had a great career. He hasn't had a single at bat for the Cubs, and so it's an awkward headline for the Cubs. If anything, I think it's more just symptomatic of how the team is run. With a very analytical bottom line approach, which is what a lot of teams do. And I would say, for context, and this may be where fans totally zone out, and I get it. There is a strong push from Major League Baseball's central office, their labor relations department, to get all 30 teams on the same page, that it is a very uniform approach. There is this idea that any one settlement can impact many future agreements as reference points. But Cubs fans don't really want to get into the weeds on all that, right? It's just figure it out.
Right.
Maybe they will before a hearing. I mean, historically, the Cubs have become, and many clubs, again, this is a kind of a global strategy from MLB of this idea of file and trial, that if you don't hit a number before this deadline, going to a hearing. Now, Kyle Tucker is clearly exceptional. So I would imagine that there is some wiggle room there for him and both sides. But also, you would think they would have gotten to that point before we all had these headlines of, Tucker Cubs fail to reach agreement, or, Cubs Tucker moving towards arbitration hearing. It's certainly an interesting way to, promote your annual fan convention next weekend to get your Cubs tickets now. But before we bury them, one phone call over the weekend or next week, or they get into town, it could get resolved. In years past, it felt like the deadline was a little bit floating to where I think one time we talked to Ian Happ, can reach an agreement, and then an hour later, Cubs Ian Happ reach agreement. So I wouldn't get too worked up about it. It's just odd. It's peculiar.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about this. Kyle Tucker must not have been a Super 2 guy or something, and Vlad Jr. must have been a Super 2 guy, because Vlad Jr. is all the way up at 28, and Kyle Tucker is only in the 15 to 17 million like that seems significantly like just in general, that's a steal. Like whatever they settle at, whatever they sign him at, that's a steal for his production. So so some of this stuff is just kind of silly, but they are kind of counting every penny in a sense, right? Like they like 2.5 million matters in a sense, 1 million matters, and I think that's what irritates fans as well. They're like, really, like this is going to cost like some uh, reliever that probably gets DFA'd in the middle of the season. That's what they're arguing over right now. Um, again, it comes down
And
to
it might not, the difference might even be smaller because presumably Tucker's camp goes high and the club
yeah,
side goes low. So I
right.
wouldn't even.
So this could be half a
It
million
could
or
be
less.
it could be a
Yeah.
smaller spread that is just kind of a guess more than hard information. But yeah, when you're talking about kind of the intricacies of the MLB's universal arbitration policy and like different comps, like it's not great, but it's not the end of the world either.
Yeah. And this type of stuff, I mean, it makes my eyes glaze over, so I can't imagine fans care much about it. So just get it done,
Yeah,
right? That's
yeah.
the bottom line. They got deals done with everyone else. Justin Steele, uh, obviously the biggest name of the deals that they got. Pearson and Eli Morgan as well were done. Surprisingly, Eli Morgan took like that news did not come out till very late. I was like, what is happening with Eli Morgan? Is he really like fighting over the Cubs battling with Eli Morgan here? I think
Yeah.
the news just didn't leak out. Uh, so at least no extension. We've talked about Steele. No extension with
Mhm.
Steele. Who knows if that's on the table or discussions will happen over the next month or so. But yeah, other than that, that was the news last night, and it felt like immediately it went negative town. You know what I mean? Like the second I saw that on I think you'd given me a little bit of a heads up there, and then I saw it publicly from our friend Jesse Rogers, and it's just I was like, oh, here we go, here we go. So we'll see. We'll see if like it's not going to lead to bad blood. I think that's the important thing that Cubs fans need to kind of understand, even if they are upset. This isn't something where you need to freak out and be like, well, now the relationship is already ruined, which I'm not getting that sense, and that's probably the most important thing because as unlikely as an extension is, you still don't want to have a sour relationship to start this thing off.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like if the Cubs give Tucker a bump now, he's going to give them a discount later. Like they're all grown-ups here. Ultimately, uh, Kyle Tucker's impressions of the Cubs will be shaped by his teammates, his coaches, his manager, the fans, the city, and ultimately what the Cubs offer or do not offer to him after this upcoming season. Like that will be where the decision is made. The Cubs just kind of have to wear it for a couple news cycles, and it will be interesting to see. Like Tucker, I believe, is scheduled to come in for Cubs convention. You'd assume that he'll do some sort of media availability there. Jed Hoyer always does multiple availabilities at these Cubs conventions. So there's still going to be more arbitration hearing questions by the time we get to that point. Stay tuned because that would be another nice kind of Cubby occurrence there to unveil this superstar player who's been a little bit off the radar because the Astros have had so many good players. Now he's supposed to be the man, and we're talking about arbitration.
Yeah, talking about arbitration. That would be hilarious if it. I mean, it's not going to push the Sammy Sosa headline, but
No.
to have that as a secondary headline after Sammy Sosa, so Cub. That'd just be so Cub. Especially this era of Cubs. It's like, come on, man. Like let's move on from this stuff. Obviously, Tucker is the big name on the field, big acquisition on the field that's supposed to impact this team. I wrote a little bit about Tyler Zombro,
Yes.
a new hire. He got a pretty. I know fans, they don't know all the titles and all that stuff and may not care, but getting a special assistant title right out of the gate is pretty significant. The special assistants often have free reign to kind of do whatever their specific skill set allows them to, right? Like, what are you best at? Go do all these things. It's because you don't want to give a specific title like that, like player, X of player development or whatever like that, because this person has their hands in all sorts of different departments, and that's what Zombro's doing. I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have. I don't want to kind of blow this up before he's even been there for a few, like he's just got here. But when you talk to him and you listen to him, which I've done a couple times now, and you hear from other people, this is a 30-year-old former player, very young guy, but very intelligent. Went to George Mason, was pre-med. I don't know. You're an East Coast guy. Have you heard of Governor's School? It's a high school. It's like a STEM high school. I think it may be well known in that area.
Yours says a South Carolina Governor's School for Science and Mathematics.
Okay, South Carolina. Okay, he's in DC now. I think I may have gotten it in my head that he's that it was in the DC area. Maybe it's something. Okay, so it's he's intelligent dude. He kind of said like science, physics, all these things are just like in his brain constantly. That's how his brain works. And in today's game, that's how pitching works, right? Like I know old school scouts don't always love to hear this stuff, but that's so important in today's game, in pitching development. And while he has high goals, right? He wants to be a team president. He wants to be a GM, something like that. He wants to run baseball ops someday for some team. So
yeah, I thought that was interesting that he kind of put that out there on right away in his first sort of like introduction to Cubs fans.
Yeah, he definitely isn't shy about what his goals are. He doesn't come across as like full of himself, though. It's not like he came across as like, this is what I'm like. He understands he has a lot of work to do. He's like, to do that, I need a lot more experience in different areas, and B, he's like, everyone expects me to be impacting this team in player development. I better deliver. Like I better do a good job of that. But it's not just player development that he's right now, his focus is acquisitions because it's the off season. He is doing it, like he's doing deep dives, not only on the guys that they've acquired or come close to acquiring, but anyone that could even be a potential acquisition. And I'm talking about from Jesus Luzardo, big names like that, to like the Ben Heller signing, these minor league non-roster invites that you're talking about. He is doing deep dives on them. He has plans, or proposals for everyone. Here's how we maximize this guy. We can dump this pitch, add this pitch, do this. He's doing this. If he does this, he'll be better. So that's a lot of what he's doing right now. But there was something that kind of triggered a conversation I had with Justin Stone when he was first hired. But he talked about how we can't, it's not cookie cutter, right? We have to understand how their bodies work. What's their injury history? What does a guy do best as far as how he moves? How, like he said something about the force he impacts on the ball. I just think like these things get so nerdy and in the weeds with how they, like, what they're looking at. But it's fascinating how you have to really look at how the body moves, right? Remember how years ago when Justin Stone was first hired, I kind of went through the like a
that was classic.
Yeah. So it's like it starts with he's like, measuring how far my shoulders can move, like how far I can move my arms. So like you understand the body movement type. And then it's like, okay, now we know once you do all those things, it's like, well, we want that. Like there was something where he said, like, actually, he's like, oh, your shoulders are really flexible. He's like, that's actually can work against you in certain ways. And it's like, you need to, like, if you were playing baseball and you're a hitter, would need to, strengthen this area and tighten up this area, things like that. It's fascinating how like you learn how a body moves. It's like, okay, with pitching, it's almost like we know how the body moves. Okay, it's not always like let's correct these things. It's because your body moves like this, you're able to throw these types of pitches, or you're able to do X, Y, and Z with a pitch. Let's lean into that. Something that stood out to me is, and I love this because it's so easy to jump on the latest trend, right? When the Astros started throwing four seamers more, and this was what the 10. It's been like 10 years now, right? It was weird to the game, right? Throwing four seams up in the zone was like, that's going to get hammered. You can't do that, and it worked, right? And so everyone said in the public sphere was like, okay, dump all the two seamers, throw four seamers up in the zone. That's it. That's how you succeed. That's not the answer. Everyone's different, and then we started chasing spin and spin rate and spin efficiency. You know what? Like
spin rate, your nickname from our boy Jesse Rogers.
And like that stuff doesn't always work. Like someone chasing Zombro was telling me he had a pitcher who was chasing spin rate, chasing spin, and he's like, you don't need to have this perfectly efficient spinning four seamer with your arsenal. He's like, just go with the 80% efficiency because you're throwing off your release point by doing this. So just go back to the 80%, and you have a steam shifted wake two seamer. We have this, like your fastball will cut at 80%. Like just go, like, and we'll add this slider, whatever it is, and now you have a complete arsenal, and you're a better pitcher with a less efficient fastball. So in theory, these people chase these things that you don't need to. It's build out the arsenal. Who are you as a pitcher, and understanding that. I think that's fascinating. Don't go too far with something that, we discovered this new fancy thing. I have to chase that. That's not always how it works. Work with the individual, figure out what's best for them, what works best for them, and build an arsenal around that. I think that's really fascinating.
Circle back to kind of where you started this, of him being a special assistant. I was interested in how he has the academic background. He pitched in the minors for the Rays, correct? And had his own practice that was a driveline-like facility, working with various pitchers. I was curious how this came together, because when you and I wrote about the cuts in scouting and reduction in staff, which seemed, severe and even beyond certain industry standards, the Cubs stress that we are still creating spaces for new talent in emerging areas. Where does Zombro fit into that overall picture?
Right. So this does one person I talked to around the league outside of the organization, when I asked, I was like, is Zombro legit? Like, he's like, look, and this is a scout, right? So he's going to tend to lean against like these data people, but he's like, everything I've heard and learned about him is he's legit. He can impact that org in a positive fashion. He's like, this is kind of leaning into that reduction of scouts, though. It's going with this, it's towards the trend that they're not suddenly zagging away from what we wrote, right? But from what I understand, Zombro was pretty highly pursued, but the reason he chose the Cubs is because Jed was very aggressive. So Zombro has a history with Andrew Bassett, who was the head of pro scouting. I'm not sure if we even know what his title is anymore, because of all the changes with scouting.
Right.
Bassett is
one of Jed's key lieutenants now. Yeah.
Whatever
the title is.
And Zombro has a history with him. Has done like some work with the Cubs. I think he's done random work with teams over the years, just kind of helping on pitchers and giving information. And he's done that in the past with the Cubs. And so they had this relationship. They were giving the willingness to kind of give him this all-encompassing role. I think really intrigued Zombro. As we said, like his ultimate goal is to be at the top of a baseball ops someday. And yeah, I think that attracted him to the Cubs. Jed was intrigued by his intelligence, his background, kind of the need for another baseball mind, pitching mind. They lost Craig Breslow about a little over a year ago now. They're very happy with Ryan Otero. Zombro was emphasized that what Breslow and Otero have kind of built in the pitching infrastructure gives him a lot to work with. It's not like he's working from a clean slate and building from the ground up. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like what their head of PD, who came from Houston, who's now my brain is not working. Kansler said, like, they're not coming over here and like we have to reinvent the wheel. They're just expanding on what's already been built. This is according to them. I don't want to.
Whenever someone says we're not reinventing the wheel, they're totally reinventing the wheel.
yeah. I don't want to act like the Cubs have it all figured out, because I think that's why I wrote what I did at the end. The Cubs are an 83-win team.
Yeah.
They have a lot of good prospects. There are some people that still feel like, hey, where do they stand out? What is their competitive advantage? But Zombro had nothing but good things to say about this organization. What stood out to him was their ability to collaborate between departments, right? Mm-hmm. So he's helping with strength and conditioning. He's communicating with strength and conditioning to what we were talking about, like how your body moves. Okay, like let's strengthen this area to make sure you can move like this, or really lean into this part of your body. Just like he's able to work in every department, and I think that intrigued him, that he kind of has that latitude to work all over the place. And Jed was intrigued by him, and it was very aggressive with his pursuit, and it made for I guess a convenient marriage. And I'm just intrigued by it. I think he's clearly intelligent. I want to see how it
it's good.
off.
It's good too, because like this last phase of the off season is largely going to be about pitching, air quotes, finding value on the margins, and consolidation of WAR, and optionality and outgetters, as Craig Counsell would say. So like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of like pitchers out there, and not all of them are probably going to be super happy with how this is going to turn out. And that is very much a Jed and Carter type of strategy of kind of waiting it out, and maybe getting some unexpected value or different players at different price points.
We'll see look, the Cubs have been pretty good at that in general over the past 5 years, right? They've been pretty solid at finding that value. Last year, obviously, it didn't work out. The year before that, it was hit or miss. But they did do a good job over the course of the season last year. They didn't do a good job to start the season, right? But then they found guys like Tyson Miller and Nate Pearson to help them near the end of the year. They're able to figure these things out on the fly. You'd prefer you don't have awful Aprils and Mays, right? I think that's the goal here right now. Make sure to find that value. Nobody knows who Ben Heller is, right? Will we know who he is by midseason? It's the guy that they just picked up from Texas, Matt Festa, who has worked. I didn't mention this. He was at Zombro was at Tread Athletics, which is huge now. And I've talked to some people around baseball. They believe it. Like, some people are like, I think they may be better than Driveline. They have more success stories. There's a lot of names. I was looking at these guys. I sometimes, like, relievers are so easy to go under your radar and you completely miss on this guy. Like Colin Snyder with Seattle last year. Go look at his previous seasons and then the season he just had, and you're just like, that is an out of the blue reliever. Like, what is this guy doing? And he's a trade guy. He worked with Zombro. Like, there's a lot of guys. Zombro is already working with other a bunch of pitchers in spring training, not spring training, but in Arizona,
Yeah.
and trying to get them to be their best selves this season. So we'll see what type of impact. Is it an immediate impact? Is it a long-term impact? Is it both? Well, I'm very curious to see how that works out. I think maybe the immediate thing we may see are like some impact with the relievers, right? Like they're good at that.
Yeah.
Can they kind of stand out now? Can they be something that can it be something that, you know, there's multiple guys coming up and down every year, and relievers are, you know, short bursts of success. So this may not be like 10 years of a reliever dominating, but you get 3 months of success. That's what
the Cubs would take April, right?
Yeah.
Let's start with a good April.
Council, what does
That have like
say?
8 blown
Outgetters,
saves
right?
by May 2nd, you know?
Yeah. So we'll see. You know, I'm not all in on saying like this is the difference maker and they've hired the most brilliant mind ever. I was just intrigued and
It's an
enough
impressive
people around
resume.
the game. And enough people around the game had positive things to say that it seemed worthwhile. And he's an outside the box thinker that has some success behind him as far as working with guys. And he's a former player, so like he earns that respect from the guys he works with. They like working with him. Something that he said that I didn't really get a chance to write because it was like we went in so many different directions was one of his big priorities is keeping these guys healthy. And I think like players love hearing that so much. It's like so much of it is just like maximize everything, throw as hard as you can, and then health isn't like the number one priority. He's like, my goal is to make sure they stay healthy. He's worked with like 2-time Tommy John guys like Cole Reagans and like wants to make sure he stays healthy. Reagans is now an all-star, you know, Cy Young type pitcher. And he looks healthier and seems like he's figured some things out. Who knows? Is that an advantage he can bring? I don't know. Like these are the types of things like we need to watch and pay attention to and see what direction they go with pitching, both at the major league level and in the minors with player development. Zombro could impact that. So we'll see. We'll see if it's just a non-story in the end, or if he's the real deal, or you know if the organization can work with him, and you know if he can take this organization to another level, because I think that they really need that. Because right now, when we talk to people around the game, you hear like, this is what the Cubs are doing that's standing out. We don't, right? We don't hear that.
No, it's definitely a good read. Check it out on The Athletic, in large part because Zombro does tie together a lot of different themes and ideas that are kind of running around the organization now at a very, you know, critical time for this front office. So definitely worthwhile. Will give you a lot of insight as the Cubs, you know, move closer towards spring training here and finish out the offseason.
Yep. All right. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe on whatever platform it is, and please subscribe on the YouTube channel. You can see our beautiful faces on there twice a week in the off season, and we'll be ramping up to 3 times a week soon, huh? That's coming up soon, I guess. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week. Cubs convention next Friday. The excitement. Sammy Sosa.
Can hear it in your voice, yeah.
I am so thrilled. But do come say hello if you are at Cubs convention. Would love to say hi. We'll have a couple episodes out before Cubs convention. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Take care.